Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chain in Focus featuring Aleph Zero. Chain in Focus is a series where we welcome the blockchain foundations behind chains with which DIA has partnered and deployed to share with us information about their chain, their vision, and explore the significance of DIA's integration into their ecosystem. We see across the blockchain landscape a multitude of L1 and L2 chains launching, and at DIA, as a cross-chain Oracle provider, it is of vital importance to be up to speed, following industry trends, and integrating with as many of these promising chains as possible. And we also intend for this series to be educational, interesting, and hopefully engaging for all of the extended DIA community and beyond. So, with that said, sit tight and get comfortable as we dive into Chain in Focus and welcome on a layer one blockchain that's unique architecture combined with an emphasis on user privacy has the potential to transform the way that individuals and corporations interact with the blockchain. That is Aleph Zero. And so at this time, I'd like to welcome to the stage Matthew Niemerg, who's the co-founder of Aleph Zero. Matthew, it's great to have you here with us today. How's everything going?
It's great. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Yeah, really exciting session we have in store today. We're also joined here on the DIA side by Paul Claudius, who's the co-founder and head of BD at DIA. Paul, you there? How's everything going on your end?
Yeah, couldn't be better. Really excited about this spaces today, and much looking forward to learn from you, Matthew, also firsthand what you guys are up to. And thanks, Dylan, for modding this as usual.
Always my pleasure. I mean, we really have a great session in store today. There's so many exciting features and products and just overall use cases that Alice really focus on and positioning themselves towards. So, Matthew, really great to have you here and looking forward to diving into all of these different aspects of Aleph Zero. And so, with that said, we do always like to start by a bit of an introduction of our speakers here. Before we get into the actual details of Aleph Zero, Matthew, if you don't mind, could you give us a little background on, just high level about your background and maybe your work history or experience in the crypto industry? What were you doing before co-founding Aleph Zero?
So yeah, before I co-founded Aleph Zero, I was at IBM actually. Well, technically, I had left IBM at the height of the 2017 bull market in November, and then but I was moving into doing more of the consulting and just wasn't really wanting to be in the classic corporate world of the one of the big, well, in this case IBM is like the oldest tech firm, and really wanted to dive more into Web3 and distributed ledger. That was the term that everybody was using at the time, was DLTs. And so then I left to just basically strike it out on my own. Within a couple, fairly soon, I actually was introduced to the rest of our co-founders, and then we ended up co-founding Aleph Zero. So before all of that, I did several postdocs throughout the world. So my background's in math. I don't have any classical training in distributed computing or cryptography, so I did a more of a computational mathematics in a applied algebraic geometry. So high performance computing is what I did initially, but for sort of large scale distributed computing applications. And then from there, whenever I went to IBM, I did high performance computing in a different direction using GPUs. And that was essentially my illustrious academic career. So I was at Berkeley for a bit, and then that was a joint position with Tsinghua University, and this was done through a fellowship that the Simons Institute put together and had awarded me. And so this would be Jim Simons from Renaissance Technology, is probably one of the biggest donors to both the math and the overall sciences in the world. And so then he's probably one of the first hedge fund managers that was really using a lot of the math to be able to go ahead and take advantage of the markets in a lot of sense, or find inefficiencies in the markets and do predictive analysis, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for the background there. And, it almost seems as if we should be referring to Aleph Zero as a DLT instead of a blockchain. as there's instances of both DAG architecture that maybe leans towards the DLT terminology. Would that be correct? Maybe just so for the future conversation here, I can refer to it correctly.
Not necessarily, right? So every blockchain or every consensus protocol, every layer one, you need to have an order of events, a sequence of events that actually comes one after another whenever it comes to the transactions and the messages. And this is just the definition of some type of like an atomic broadcast protocol or Byzantine agreement protocol. This is just a necessary requirement that you actually do get this linear sequence of events. So while we do use a DAG as an intermediary structure, the end goal is still the same. It's still the same for us as well as for any other chain out there. And in that sense, you do end up with a chain of events that is a sequence one after another. So we don't have that immediately, right? That's sort of that's where the DAG structure comes into play. But during the process, we take that DAG and it transforms it into a line, a degenerate DAG, so to speak, where now you can put all the vertices in order one after another.
Understood. Okay, got it. Thank you for that clarification. Definitely happy to have that down and understood fully now. And we'll dive into a lot more of the different technical components here. But as we, just begin off the call here with the background on Aleph Zero, when we look at the project, there's really so many exciting things going on, as I mentioned, right? From implementing zero-knowledge proofs and multi-party computation, using its own novel consensus mechanism, and so much more. We will get into each of these components individually, but before we do, can you help us draw out the larger picture here, Matthew? So, how did the idea for Aleph Zero come to life? And when we take a look at it from a high level, really, what is the true vision and goal for Aleph Zero in terms of its positioning as a blockchain?
Yeah, so the initial beginnings of Aleph Zero were really trying to coming at the end of the 2017 ICO era, and what we were trying to solve in a lot of sense was not, I mean, yes, of course we were trying to solve a more efficient consensus protocol and a more high performance blockchain. But even then, it was just the manner of approach whenever it comes to building out the technology stack. And there's a lot of really great projects out there, but at the same time, there's a lot of not so great projects, at least from a from a technology perspective, where they're not necessarily have the same level of understanding of distributed systems from the last four decades, or they are doing really crazy hype and using a lot of marketing terms and not really doing this in an educational fashion. And so then obviously in this entire space where it's very speculative, right? So we really wanted to take this where it would be a more sustainable approach to the markets, not necessarily sell people vaporware, but really focus on delivering products first, and then from there going ahead and innovating and building on top of the sort of the base layer and the base tech.
Got it. So let's stay here for a second and now compare this to some of these traditional architectures which you might be referencing here, right? So Aleph Zero is the largest blockchain that uses ink, which for anybody listening and is unfamiliar with ink, this is a Rust embedded domain specific language that compiles to WASM. And so for anybody who might be familiar with these terms, Matthew, can you give us a little bit of a high level overview on why you decided to use ink and furthermore WASM? And really, what is the core difference between Aleph Zero and these traditional EVM chains in terms of a technical perspective?
Yeah, so WASM, the idea why we chose WASM is really more because it's used outside of the crypto industry, right? So you have other industry players, Facebook's, Mozilla, web browsers like Mozilla, that they use WASM embedded into the web browser or in their own tech and product stack. So the notion that we had was, well, why should we go ahead and only use a technology that is unique and very niche to this industry, where if instead we adopt a standard that is used outside, that allows us to get other buy-in, from other industry players to help improve that tech stack. So then this is a way of saying, well, if it's open source and we're just adopting an open source standard, and other parties external parties outside of our primary industry are innovating and making that open source tech stack better, making those standards better, they're improving compilers, et cetera, then that is capital and resources that this industry didn't have to put in order to make things more efficient.
Absolutely. And when we actually take a look at Aleph Zero, really one of the things that sets it apart, in my opinion, is how the target demographic on the chain is not just, the target demographic for builders, rather, is not just dApps, but also enterprise grade solutions. And as you're referencing here with WASM, it's, used outside of just the crypto industry, which is probably, beneficial in terms of your positioning towards these enterprise grade solutions integrating into the Aleph Zero ecosystem. Can you give us a little background on really, how Aleph Zero's different features are catering to these enterprises' needs, and how this is different from other blockchain architectures? Maybe one of the things to reference here and discuss is the privacy features. You guys have, a real focus towards these ZKPs and multi-party computation to ensure the security and privacy of user data. How does this tie into the overall vision as it relates to enterprise grade solutions integrating with Aleph Zero?
Yeah, so there are two primary barriers whenever it comes to enterprise adoption, at least from what we've been able to identify. And those are security as well as privacy. So the security side is making sure that you're actually using, the actual techniques from the last, 4 decades, the last 40 years from the distributed systems world, and utilizing all the math proofs, all the cryptography proofs, all of that, you can bundle together with proper software development where you have your dev environment, your staging environment, your production environment, and actually doing things in this fashion, right? And it's one of those things where this industry also tends to be of the opinion of move fast and break things, where you just go ahead and deploy and launch, and maybe you've done smart contract audits, but there's always some examples of missing some things, like even with this latest exploit from Kyber, for instance, where it's one of those things where it's such a hard thing to find, and even these auditors are very likely not able to find it. So it's a situation where you really need to take a step back and understand that these enterprises and corporates are way more conservative. They're not going to be sitting in this sort of speculative space like all the degenerates that we all are here, right? And you have to actually go ahead and approach this in a different fashion and provide them with the level of assurances whenever it does come to the security. Now, as far as the privacy angle, then you have public companies that have proprietary data that they don't necessarily want to put on public chains. And so then you need to come up with solutions for distributed file storage, or being able to do confidential computing with, say, the multi-party computation techniques that we have been able to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I do want to come back to this idea of, these enterprise grade solutions here, deploying, integrating with Aleph Zero. And, so far on the conversation today, we've really gotten into the technical weeds of it. But I want to bring it back to a little bit of somewhat of a high level here, and really take a look at like the tools and, the public goods that are provided for builders within the Aleph Zero ecosystem, right? So for anybody listening, who would like to deploy or integrate their product or service into Aleph Zero, there's so many tools available, like Sol to Ink, Solang. Could you give us some background on the actual process of what it looks like to integrate into Aleph Zero, and more on these tools that are provided as public goods for builders on the chain?
Yeah. So how to say this? So whenever you have developers who are wanting to go ahead and deploy their applications and do so in a seamless fashion, you want to be able to provide them with good, a good interface, right? A good, simple means to be able to do this. So whether or not that is pre-existing templates, pre-existing, say, circuits like ZK circuits that are maybe not optimal or optimized for their first view, for their product long term, but actually are able to be utilized early on just for an MVP. The idea is that once they're able to kind of put that all together and get a working product out and deployed, then at this point we can, we and other cryptographers can work with them on optimizing these circuits where it's more of a customized for their privacy solutions. Does that sort of answer your question, or maybe I didn't understand it right?
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. I just wanted to give some context into these tools. When we talk about Aleph Zero and many of its novel architectures, it might be a little bit seemingly complex or from a very first glance. And so I wanted to give people in the audience the chance to hear from you firsthand, some of these tools and really what the integration process looks like, and to understand that there is so much assistance within this process, right? There's transpilers that actually help convert different code into what's necessary to deploy contracts onto Aleph Zero. And so just kind of wanted to get your insights at a high level on that topic, but I think you definitely covered that well. And as we talk about public good infrastructure on Aleph Zero, I think it's a perfect time to really dive in and explore the DIA integration and the significance of the DIA integration into the Aleph Zero ecosystem. Maybe before we bring Paul in here, Matthew, if you don't mind, we'll stay with you here. Can you elaborate on the importance of Oracle tooling on Aleph Zero and the significance of DIA making its data library available for developers building on Aleph Zero?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So oracles are just absolutely required whenever it comes to anything within DeFi. And the reason is because often you have a situation where you are potentially using an AMM or some other mechanism as a price oracle on chain, but that is manipulatable. So you need to have some type of external source that can provide that. Essentially, it's like some type of averaging technique or other mechanism in place to give a much more valid price that is not going to be manipulatable, or at least not as manipulatable as some of these DeFi exploits that do occur, right? Where you're able to change the reserve supply of balances in some liquidity pools, and in doing so, you're doing it all in a single block, and maybe there's a failure to update the pricing oracle, the pricing information, and the derivation of that in between, the time whenever the pools were updated with different values, and had either some additional tokens added or removed that did change this price. And so by having that external source of information, you've removed that potential attack vector. And so then from that perspective, you definitely do need to be having external Oracle price feeds.
Absolutely. And let's stay here, Paul, if we have you on stage. I know you got kicked for a second there. I'd love to hear from you also. Maybe you can add some context here and shed some light into the benefits that, uniquely DIA's deployment onto Aleph Zero will have for developers that are building DeFi and related dApps on Aleph Zero. How is DIA specifically as an Oracle adding unique value within its integrations on Aleph Zero and across other ecosystems?
Yeah. Please let me know if you guys can hear me. I don't know. Was just kicked off, but luckily, Matthew, I could hear you most of the time. So So my perspective on that. So first of all, I think speaking here for the entire team, we're super excited that we deployed on Aleph Zero. So it has been a real pleasure to work with the team, and just by the sheer amount of like feature requests, ideas, the back and forth, really, I think it's a testament to such a vibrant ecosystems you guys have been building. So what are the benefits of us being part of an infrastructure such as Aleph Zeros? So I think we regard oracles possibly a bit differently than our peers do. We see oracles as an infrastructure, really a common good. So like looking at the Maslow pyramid, basic needs like air and water, oracles is developer tooling we believe that should be easily accessible. So a common good, and I think we're very much aligned here with the Aleph Zero team, which has been and I think this is very visible and is being reflected by a lot of builders, is providing a lot of great tooling. And I think we are contributing to this by having price feeds you can directly use as a builder, having randomness directly accessible, and these feeds subsidized as a common good by the foundation. Beyond that, I think something where we provide a different value proposition to our peers is that we can also provide ecosystem-specific asset price feeds. So this means it's not just the blue chips we can cover, but it's the assets which will be the strong pillars within an ecosystem. Pricing these feeds based on native DAXs or external sources is something we believe we can really create a very positive flywheel effect for an ecosystem that can reutilize these assets. So yeah, that's hopefully how we can contribute to this very cool ecosystem we're very happy to be part of.
And Paul, maybe we can stay here with you. I would like to open up the conversation here to a bit of sort of like an open discussion, and take it high level and really look at like different growth drivers and different tools or metrics that you evaluate when considering which ecosystems look promising for DIA to deploy onto and to integrate with. So Paul, when exactly this, right? When you're considering which ecosystems are promising for DIA from a DIA perspective for integrating our Oracle suite, what are the components or metrics that you evaluate, and what stands out to you about Aleph Zero?
I mean, obviously, we're looking for ecosystems which we believe can make up a relevant part of the overall market, and I think this can come from like through different for a very different set of drivers. And I think Aleph Zero takes a couple of those. So it is a unique value proposition you guys have, especially on the privacy side. I hear this reflected over and over again from various builders. It's exactly these differentiating factors where we believe that an ecosystem can provide the right tooling for builders, which they can't find somewhere else. Then it's not only, I guess, the tech stack, but also, I guess, the core beliefs of a team and its ecosystems. And it was kind of obvious to us this high conviction Aleph Zero has when it comes to developer experience, and that's for us always a very clear indicator that we're speaking with the right folks, speaking with different teams, a Zero ID, for example, and understanding how they are being supported. I think this really shows that it's an ecosystem which goes beyond what others are doing in equipping their builders and people within that ecosystem with the right tooling and the resources they need to execute whatever they want to build.
I would absolutely echo this. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, please jump in. That's basically, I think, the two drivers here. And I mean, I know, Dylan, you you have a similar, I think, opinion on this as we discuss Aleph Zero in the team. But yeah, please add what I might have been missing here.
No, nothing missing. I would just echo what you said and agree. And, it's very obvious when going back and forth with the Aleph Zero team, their their completely comprehensive understanding of the DIA integration and of all of the different components that are relevant, from all angles, right? I think the conversations within our teams have really stood out as forward thinking. And so it's great to work with alongside teams that are, pushing the frontier as well and as equally, very well familiar with exactly how DIA operates and works so that we can actually optimize the integration to better, suit their specific needs. And they can understand the upper bounds and the lower bounds of these limits as well on a technical level. So yeah, really, really been a great experience working with these teams. And I think it's really just the beginning of this collaboration here. I'm excited to see all of the different dApps now that we can continue to support within the Aleph Zero ecosystem. And Matthew, maybe I can bring it back to you. We've really gotten into the technical weeds here so far, but I'd love to hear from your perspective as the co-founder here of Aleph Zero. Really, what do you see are the key growth drivers to get a new ecosystem off the ground? Right? We've discussed, having advanced technical, tooling, but apart from that, there's so many different, probably within your role as co-founder, there's probably so many different areas and parts of the position that you're focused on. What are these growth drivers?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's really, I think that it's a choose your own adventure type situation, right? And we try to be a bit more market driven whenever it comes to making these decisions. Obviously, the market changes and sentiment changes as far as what's the interest in the industry. But overall, it's really providing at a first step the tools for developers just to make their lives easier. And if you do that in a broadly, general purpose manner, which obviously all smart contract languages are general purpose, and then it's up to the developers to find their niche within whichever vertical they want to sort of identify as their product. And then if you're able to create and construct infrastructure that is useful for general purpose products, that helps a lot. And then after that, it's building out the infrastructure for privacy applications. And then once you start having sort of that base layer done, and maybe you have your other infrastructure components such as oracles, right? Which is why we're talking with you guys today. At that point, you can start sort of I don't know how to sort of lobbing the ball, doing these sort of soft pitches to different verticals, right? Whether it's in gaming or if it's in DeFi or if it's in applications with that corporates are wanting to have. But you really have two different big categories and classifications. One is going to be more on the community and what crypto is looking for, right? Which is really primarily DeFi and speculation and just having fun with meme coins. And obviously, there's other things beyond that, especially in gaming. And so it's more of a retail focused type direction. And then separately, you have also the enterprises, right, and the applications that they're wanting, whether or not it's coming from health records or inventory management or supply chain or provenance of supply chain. So I mean, you have this sort of wide range of applications that do exist, but I think you have to start identifying the different sectors as either primarily retail and sort of crypto native applications versus enterprise and corporate applications. And then from there, you start thinking about, okay, well, what are ways that you can do I don't know. For instance, you have confidential computing, and you want to do some type of privacy enhancing application where you have corporates that want to go ahead and train their machine learning. They want to do train their data set using machine learning, but they don't want to necessarily reveal what their data set is to some external party. How do you do that? Technically, you could do that with trusted execution environments. You could do that with multi-party computation, although it's rather slow and it's probably not going to ever be technically feasible because of other limitations that exist. But it is possible to do these types of things. And then it's really more of a matter of identifying the key components of what are the bits and pieces that people want private whenever it comes to these applications. So and that is a common enough that is common enough to be able to say, all right, well, we need to identify what components are private, and that doesn't matter if it's an enterprise application or if it's a a crypto native application. It just is it's more of a conversation of how do you design the smart contracts and you design your application in such a way where you know these are the components that I want private. This is what should be made public. This is private that needs to have, say, that is sort of local privacy that requires zero knowledge proofs. This is globally, this is data that needs to be private from a global perspective for say globally read access, and you have to rethink and redesign your viewpoint of how to be developing these applications with this in mind. And it's a process, right? It's a training process as well for developers so that they can start thinking about, so having that forward thinking design mechanism in their minds where they know these are the things that I need to enable a privacy enhancing applications. These are the things that could be leaked out if I'm, as far as leaked information, or could be derived if this information is public. So it's really going to be custom and bespoke for every application. But what this gives you is still a broader framework of what to be doing. Now, as far as what we're focusing on is big picture. We just want to have a lot of applications that are interested in privacy. So these are sort of your priority. These go to the top of our priority queue, so to speak, whenever it comes to supporting and providing technical assistance and things like this. And then after that, it's going to be probably your DeFi applications. And this is just because we've seen how DeFi has provided a lot of adoption in this space. And obviously, whenever it actually comes to having people adopting your network, your distributed network, your platform, you need to be able to have something for them to work with. And obviously, this is the biggest application, at least that we've seen so far, has always been DeFi.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the background there and the comprehensive overview. These two big things you outlined, of course, community and what crypto is looking for, and then also positioning yourselves towards the enterprise side, and sort of what are the applications that the enterprises want to build and utilize blockchain technology for. And really interesting insights actually on sort of how, from your perspective, you're looking to analyze or better understand the different components of these enterprises that will actually require privacy. I think that that's a really interesting point, actually, and it's forward looking. I don't think, maybe you definitely know more on this than I do, but at this point, from my understanding, I think that this is still nascent in terms of enterprises looking to utilize blockchain technology and understanding which parts of their, I guess, entire end-to-end stack need to actually have privacy as relates to blockchain. And I'm excited for this. It seems as though, looking forward, this is really going to be sort of this hurdle that once we can, once you guys are helping to solve, once we all collectively tackle this, these two industries will be much more closely connected. So I definitely appreciate that. And so, as we do look forward here, let's transition into wrapping it up. I want to be respectful of everybody's time here today. Maybe we can take a look forward. And Matthew, I maybe first I just want to pick your brain here. This is early stage still for Aleph Zero, so to speak, in terms of all the exciting things that are being developed and so much more to come. Really, where do you see things for Aleph Zero? I know this is sort of this standard question, but it applies so well with what you guys are doing here. Where do you guys see yourselves in 5 years? In terms of positioning, and the types of applications and all that's going on the chain.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we do is we do take a slightly different approach whenever it comes to compliance and regulations. We're not like mandating compliance, obviously, on chain. It's still permissionless, but the products that we're building out, we want to be able to have some type of compromise whenever it comes to being able to, all right, so taking a step back here. There's all sorts of legal risks whenever it comes to privacy and in anonymizing transfers. So you see what's been going on with Tornado Cash, with the DOJ, with other, not just in the U.S. but other countries. There tends to be this sort of pushback against anonymous transfers, and rightly so. So you have this situation where you have money launderers or terrorist financiers, and obviously we all know, we're as crypto natives, that money launderers should never be using the blockchain because it's all public and it's all obviously all available and accessible for that information. But terrorist financing is definitely a problem. I mean, not theoretically it's a problem. I don't think it's an actual real problem, in the sense that, at least even with the latest example with Hamas and Israel, there's the report, supposedly, allegedly, that, oh yeah, there's a bunch of terrorist financing that was going through these blockchain addresses, and look how much Hamas raised this way. And that was just all lies. Essentially, they aggregated the amounts associated to a single wallet and said that all of these amounts are going to be used for terrorist financing, when it was clear, even after these data analytic firms like Elliptic, reported and said, no, that's false. It's only a fraction of this went to Hamas. And so it's these situations where the Washington D.C. has this vendetta and a bone to pick with anonymous transfers. They just don't like it, right? And so you end up in these situations where you have enforcement actions, because it's really contrary to the policy tools that they want to impose, primarily in being able to have dollar dominance. The thing with all this is that the actual goal of what they really want is full dollar dominance and then financial surveillance. The actual things and rhetoric that is put out by the State Department is money laundering and terrorist financing. We got to combat these things. So if you take their rhetoric that they're actually using as at face value, then if we can design and create cryptographic solutions that actually enhance the existing AML policies and sort of KYC requirements that you need, then we're also able to go ahead and design a solution that is also able to protect people's financial privacy. And so then what you have is this situation where you have this walled garden, so to speak, where only the only access that you have to this walled garden is if you have KYC'd in the past and you have proven that you're not on the sanctions list. And so in that sense, you have a solution where you do have anonymity, and cash-like anonymity, but you have this mathematical assurances and proof regarding the fact that everybody who is using this for anonymous purposes are not terrorist financiers. They're not money launderers. They're not criminals. They're all good actors, right? And this is, I don't think that that the U.S. tends to like this approach, but I don't think there's much that can be done on this if you're actually fully compliant. So what we're focusing on is creating those types of technological solutions with other partners such as IDOS, and other people, to be able to go ahead and actually solve this financial privacy problem. And I think from this perspective, you throw this in and you integrate it with DeFi and other on-chain activities. You have a very powerful narrative where it's very difficult for the governments of the world to say, hey, look, you're facilitating money laundering, you're facilitating tax evasion, and you're basically saying, well, no, this is designed not to do that. It's designed not to allow for that to occur, and this is why. And I think this is a product that people want, right? This is not necessarily a product that government wants, but it's definitely a product that people want. And I think that by continuing to push in that manner and creating actual solutions within the DeFi space that do have privacy, we're going to be way better off, than we are now.
Really neat here. Really neat approach here with this walled garden, as you mentioned. You actually have to have KYC in the past and proven that you're not on these lists to actually be able to access the chain, or rather the applications on it. And in doing so, you can experience this privacy.
So the idea is that it's only you only provide a walled garden for particular applications, right? So you think of it this way: you have your shielder primitive, which is its own smart contract, but then and that is what's going to anonymize a token. It's going to anonymize A0. And then separately, the only way to interact with that smart contract is to be on a whitelisted or gated, sort of have gated access. And in order to have the gated access, then you have to go through this KYC process, right? And have some type of zero knowledge verified credential that's stored on chain that can, doesn't necessarily have all your PII on it, but it has enough of zero knowledge proofs that you've been able to attest and generate by these other providers to actually verify and say, yes, on this date we searched the sanctions list and this person is not on it, or with 90% probability there were no hits, and we think that this is all valid, and we're going to allow them to use this the anonymizing features. Everything else, you could still have a fully public and permissionless chain, and other smart contracts don't have to use that. But anybody who would integrate with and say do some type of cross smart contract calls to say this shielder primitive that we're looking at deploying once we're all ready with the legal side of things, then everybody would have to do that KYC process, right? But that doesn't prevent anybody else, any other developer from doing this and not requiring it, right? I think that the issue here is that if that were to happen, those developers open themselves up to potential litigation by the DOJ and other governments.
I think this is, sorry, Paul, were you about to?
No, I just want to comment on this. I just congratulate you guys on the IDOS project. I think it's such a nuanced and clever way of addressing possible regulatory hurdles that might make sense while leaving the overall permissionless nature of the ecosystem intact. And it is also so, I guess, adaptable to upcoming regulation and use cases and how people will interact with it. So I'm quite excited to see how this being utilized and hopefully also accepted or in line with the regulation to basically not provide any more ground for questioning the legitimacy of transactions and use cases.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think you're right. It is supposed to be upgradable as clarity comes down the line whenever it comes to either new laws prohibiting or requiring certain features to be done. I think what we've seen so far is everybody is on the sort of the cypherpunk, the CryptoPunk sort of side of things, which is great. That pushes the boundary and it pushes in the direction of more freedom and liberty and the ability of doing transactions without any intermediaries. At the same time, there are existing laws that do limit this, regardless of whether or not the technology has implemented solutions to comply with those laws. So the question here is more about how do you create a system and design a scheme that on its, for all intents and purposes, you're looking at what the overall policy goals are. You're looking at the overall reasons for being able to restrict these things, and you come up with a solution that essentially, or at least tries, at least I think we solve it, that solves these problems. And all the rhetoric that you've seen from at least, obviously I'm a U.S. citizen, so I have a little bit more of a bias whenever it comes to following U.S. regulations and laws. At the same time, they do have the long arm of the law does exist whenever it comes to the U.S. for better or worse. However, for the most part, if you listen to the regulators, they just don't think that there's any solution, or if you've engaged with them, they claim that they have not yet seen a design or a solution that is compliant, right, or that is going to work for them. And I don't know if this is because they're not, engaging properly with the people who are designing these things, or if they're just looking at it from a sort of a glancing at the surface and saying, oh, well, Tornado Cash, clearly they weren't compliant. They didn't do anything whenever it came to KYC, and they let anybody go ahead and use their platform. All these mixers, they don't do anything. They let anybody go ahead and use use their protocols or what have you. And I think that so it's unclear to me if there's not the level of engagement with the policymakers so that there's better education, that there are solutions, or if they are just pushing back on the other side of things, right? Where we have people in the industry that are pushing on the sort of the cypherpunk narrative, the cypherpunk narrative, and then you have the government coming back and saying, well, we're going to take the other extreme position, and you got to just find a middle ground. The issue is that you don't really have a lot of sensible policy talk in the states, and I, actually, I don't think there's a lot of sensible policy talk all over the world, but that's a different that's a different point altogether.
Yeah, I think maybe we can basically just remain and utilize the strategy in the broader space just to do things and see when they actually are live in production, how people react to them, and maybe this even works for the regulatory angle. And like coming back to iDOS, just implementing this, using it, and I think at some point will be really hard to argue for a regulator against the benefits of utilizing ZKPs and making a much more resilient stack. So I find it actually quite exciting to potentially see that. While we always believe that DeFi is like the foundational driver for the space, maybe regulatory compliance is basically moving across the stack into TradFi, and these like a ZKP ID tooling is something we'll see being used much more broadly beyond DeFi, where it was primarily now designed to be compliant, but it might be the much better stack for a much broader applicational use case.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree that we just have to come up with these products and push them out there and deploy them. And at some point, we have to be able to, as the industry, we have to come up with designs and market solutions that, hey, we just have to be like, hey, regulators, we think we've solved the problem. We're deploying it, and we're really doing our best whenever it comes to mitigating the use of these tools from and not allowing bad actors to do it. This is what we've done, and this is why we think it's good. And you just sort of keep pushing that narrative, and either they come back and they say, you know what, this isn't good enough, or they're like, well, it's good enough. And in some sense, I think that we can take a play from the playbook of even just Bitcoin and the broader crypto markets as a whole. And this is what we did. Essentially, the governments ignored this for so long that the cat was out of the bag, and they just couldn't regulate it to the extent that they wanted to. Right. So there's just so much that's been pushed in this industry just for people who are running nodes, validator nodes, and them not even having to do KYC on approving transactions, right? So there was no real way for them to go ahead and add additional regulations for like the very core base level infrastructure without essentially having full blown riots. I think in every country worldwide is essentially I think what would have happened. Um, but we could still adopt that a similar playbook in trying to come up with these types of compromised solutions or I think valid solutions, not even compromisable solutions. They just are common sense and they make sense. And just pushing them out as products, and eventually, if you get enough user adoption, then it just becomes an easier sell for them to approve it at the end of the day.
I really enjoyed this little dialogue between you, this dialogue between you guys. I think it really shares insights into like really all that you are focusing on, Matthew, as really the co-founder here. It's like, it's not just the technical aspects. It's not just integrating dApps and teams into the ecosystem, which teams you're partnered with, but there's also just these larger regulatory issues. There's social issues. I mean, it's really neat to gain your perspective today on this call in terms of, and I'm sure there's so much more, right? Of just like really all of the different areas that you have to be focused on, in terms of the development of a chain itself. Um, and so really appreciated the insights there, and we got to hear from your perspective a little bit on some of these, these regulatory aspects here. Being conscientious of time here, let's just kind of close into some closing remarks. Matthew, for anybody in the audience who wants to get, follow up here, who wants to explore the chain and really give it a try, anybody on the user side or anybody who wants to integrate on the technical side, are there any resources that you would refer to them now as next steps?
Yeah, so there's the general documentation, docs.alefzero.org, that will help walk you through a lot on the how to be using Ink as a smart contract language, running validator nodes, et cetera, et cetera. We have a Discord that we try to drive all the developers to, just because it's easier to answer questions, a little bit better on the community management side. To be able to address these more technical topics, and that's where we have our we have some people from Cardinal that are more dedicated on providing support through those means, and then overall just there we're accessible, we're so it's one of those things where reach out and try to get a hold of us. There are plenty of other documentation whenever it comes to the consensus protocol if you're interested in that, although it's very technical. Obviously, we have open source code on GitHub. You can also just dive deeper into the broader substrate tech stack, although this is also once more very, very technical. We will be having and host. We have done these in the past, various smart contract workshop sessions, just to kind of help onboard people who have maybe Solidity smart contract experience but don't know quite the nuances related to Ink. And we'll be pushing out more and more content on that, and also just having more and more workshops like it's just where we can help support and do some type of either like learning experience for like a mini pre-hackathon type sessions, or even later on we have hackathons that we're putting together where developers who do have some more the smart contract experience in Rust or rather in Ink, can go ahead and develop applications. But there's definitely a lot that we've been working on and building out, and a lot of that just comes down to education and creating those resources that make it accessible. But there is a lot already that exists even now.
Thank you, Matthew. Great to hear from you on that topic there. And once again, in the audience, anybody who's interested, go check out those resources. Also give Aleph Zero a look on, of course, X. Maybe give them a follow as well. Paul, maybe any last thoughts from you? Any developers on the chain who want to explore integrating DA's oracles on Aleph Zero, where would you recommend them to get in touch with us or to review that documentation?
Yeah, either way, so you'll find more about the oracles deployed on Aleph in the Aleph documentation, but otherwise just easiest way to just head over to our X handle here from the spaces, and then hop into our page, where in the developers section you'll find link out to our dev Discord, to the documentation. Also, if you just want to play around with the oracles, I think something we just shipped and are quite proud of is the Oracle Builder. So this really is supposed to push the state of how oracles can be accessed. So you can select your price figs, deploy them yourself, play around with them, change the sources. So we hope to provide a really good experience, and our Discord is always open for any questions, so hit us up anytime.
I definitely want to echo that. Go check out Oracle Builder if you're interested in Oracle tooling. I think this is really a really unique tool that's at the forefront of innovation on the Oracle tooling side of things here. That said, I want to say Matthew and Aleph Zero team, thank you so much for joining us today on Partner in Focus. Really valued the insights that you shared today on really all the exciting things you guys are doing and how you're positioning yourselves, not just for the current needs, not just for the current blockchain environment and landscape, but for the future as well. And when we look forward, I'm really excited to see, all of these things even come more to life, and to continue to collaborate with you guys and to drive innovation on your chain collectively and together. So thank you, Matthew, and to the Aleph Zero team for joining us. Thank you, everybody in the audience who joined in today and gave us a listen, or if you're listening on record. And at that said, have a great rest of your days, and we'll see you on the next episode of Chain in Focus. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.